The rain-soaked alley smelled of rust and wet cardboard when the young man bent down to lift a sack of scrap metal, his fingers already raw from a day that had started before sunrise and showed no mercy as it dragged toward night. Few people noticed him there, shoulders hunched, shoes worn thin, face calm but tired in a way that came from years of carrying responsibility too early. What no one could see was that this quiet moment, this simple act of helping a stranger load scrap into a truck, would decide the future of his love, his dignity, and his life itself. Because the old scrap dealer watching him closely from beneath a torn cap was not who he seemed to be. Before the story goes any further, take a second to pause. If you believe in kindness when no one is watching, in second chances, and in judging people by their hearts rather than their status, then like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that humanity still matters. The young man's name was Arav Malik, and life had never offered him shortcuts. He grew up in a one-room house behind a railway line, where the walls shook every time a train passed, and his mother's prayers were louder than the noise outside. His father had died when Arav was 16, leaving behind unpaid debts and a silence that never quite left the house. From that day on, Arav worked wherever work existed. He washed dishes, carried bricks, fixed bicycles, and later earned a degree through night classes and stubborn determination. Love, when it came, surprised him. He met Mira in a public library, both reaching for the same book on a dusty shelf. She was calm, intelligent, and carried herself with a grace that made people assume she belonged to comfort. Arav learned later that she did. Mira was the only daughter of Raghavendra Verma, one of the city's most powerful industrialists, a man whose name opened doors and whose shadow intimidated entire boardrooms. Arav knew the truth the moment he learned who her father was. Loving her would cost him more than he could afford. Yet Mira loved him back, not for what he owned, but for how he listened, how he treated strangers, and how he never complained about the weight on his shoulders. When Raghavendra Verma heard about the man his daughter wanted to marry, he said nothing. That silence was more frightening than anger. He had built his empire from nothing, but wealth had hardened him, teaching him that people often wore masks. He had seen daughters married into lies, sons-in-law chasing inheritance, and loyalty vanish the moment money changed direction. He did not want speeches or resumes. He wanted truth. And so, at an age when most men enjoyed retirement in guarded estates, Raghavendra chose to test a man's soul in the only way he trusted, by stripping himself of status. Disguised in old clothes, beard untrimmed, hands stained with grease, Raghavendra became a scrap dealer operating from the forgotten edges of the city. He rented a broken-down truck, paid a local man to spread word of daily labor, and waited. It was there that he met Arav, who showed up every morning without complaint, lifting metal, sorting waste, and helping others without being asked. Raghavendra watched quietly as Arav shared water with an injured worker, covered for a man who arrived late because of a sick child, and refused extra pay when a scale malfunctioned in his favor. No one knew the old scrap dealer's eyes were trained not on profit, but on character. Days turned into weeks. The work was brutal, the pay barely enough, yet Arav never missed a day. When the old scrap dealer pretended to miscount money, Arav corrected him. When he pretended to drop a sack deliberately to test patience, Arav picked it up without irritation. When he spoke harshly, Arav responded with respect, not fear. Each test was small, almost cruel in its simplicity, but together they painted a picture Raghavendra had not expected. What Raghavendra did not know was that Arav was fighting battles of his own beyond the scrapyard. Mira's relatives whispered that love would fade when money spoke louder. Friends warned Arav that marrying into wealth would mean a lifetime of humiliation. Job interviews ended politely the moment his background surfaced. Bills stacked up at home as his mother's health worsened. Yet every evening, after washing the smell of metal from his skin, Arav studied, applied for work, and dreamed not of luxury but of stability. He wanted to stand beside Mira without shame. One afternoon, the old scrap dealer staged his harshest test. He accused Arav of stealing, loudly enough for others to hear, humiliating him in front of the group. Arav stood there, heart pounding, reputation trembling on the edge. He could have walked away. He could have shouted back. Instead, he calmly emptied his pockets, explained the misunderstanding, and accepted the insult without bitterness. That night, Raghavendra did not sleep. He saw in Arav something rare, strength that did not need applause. The turning point came on a day when rain flooded the yard and work became dangerous. An accident sent a worker under a pile of metal, and chaos followed. Arav moved without hesitation, cutting his hands on sharp edges as he pulled the man free. The old scrap dealer watched as Arav gave his own earnings to help pay for the injured man's hospital visit. It was then that Raghavendra realized this was no performance. This young man did not act kind. He was kind. Still, one final test remained. Raghavendra invited Arav for tea in the small shed that served as his office. He spoke about his imaginary daughter, about fears of marrying her off to a man who might abandon her for money. He described wealth as a curse, loyalty as a rare coin. Arav listened, then shared his own fears of being seen as unworthy, of loving someone whose world he might never fully enter. He spoke of dignity as something no one could gift or take, only protect. Raghavendra felt something crack inside him. The revelation did not come with thunder. It came quietly, in a private meeting at Mira's home, where the old scrap dealer arrived clean-shaven, dressed in a tailored suit that carried decades of authority. Arav stood frozen as realization dawned. The man he had respected for his honesty was the very figure he feared most. The truth landed heavy, and for the first time Arav felt small. He expected rejection, ridicule, or a lecture about his place in the world. Instead, Raghavendra spoke of the scrapyard, of watched moments, of silent tests. He spoke of how wealth could buy comfort but never character. He admitted his deception without pride, only necessity. Arav listened, heart racing, unsure whether this was acceptance or another trial. When Raghavendra finally expressed his trust, it was not dramatic. It was firm, emotional, and earned. He welcomed Arav not as a poor boy marrying up, but as a man worthy of his daughter. The days that followed changed everything, yet nothing about Arav changed at his core. Opportunities opened, not because of favors, but because Raghavendra insisted Arav stand on his own achievements. Arav found work aligned with his skills, continued caring for his mother, and treated wealth with the same humility he had shown poverty. Mira watched with quiet pride as the two most important men in her life learned to respect each other, not through power, but through truth. The wedding was simple despite the means available, because Arav requested it that way. Guests whispered stories of the scrap dealer revelation, some laughing, some reflecting. But those who looked closely saw something rare, a bond formed not by contracts or status, but by tested integrity. Just before the ending of this story, take a moment and comment below. Write one word that this story made you feel. Was it hope, respect, belief, or tears? Your words matter more than you know. Years later, when Raghavendra truly retired, he often visited the scrapyard that no longer existed, now replaced by a community center built for workers and their families. Arav sometimes joined him, not as a son-in-law proving himself, but as a man who had already done so long ago. The memory of rusted metal and quiet tests remained a reminder that the greatest examinations in life arrive disguised as ordinary days. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness seen by no one can still change everything, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting to believe.